The courtroom hums like a radiator that won't quite switch off, shoes scuff tile, a clerk coughs once, fluorescent lights insist on their own daylight. Judge Caprio opens his notebook, kind face set to neutral. Next case, Mrs. Grayson. 42. 25 over in a residential zone. A woman rises with the precision of someone used to being noticed. Tailored blazer, hair tucked with surgical neatness, a handbag that keeps its shape. Calm mouth, cold eyes. Your Honor, I'm not paying that ticket. Caprio leans, not unkindly. Do you dispute the violation? I dispute the lie. The officer lied. A ripple moves through the benches, chairs whisper, someone tsks, a teenager leans forward as if the air itself tilted. You're accusing a police officer of lying? Caprio asks, voice even. Yes. And I can prove it. I have video. She steps to the lectern, unlocks her phone with a hard thumb, sets it down like a chess piece. The screen shows a quiet morning street, pale sun, long shadows. Her car, maybe, glides past. Nothing reckless. No screaming tires. Just the day preceding. Caprio watches, lid lowered, patient. The clip ends. He rewinds, pauses near the license plate. Pixels smear. Time stamp blinks, 7:42 a.m. Where did this come from, he asks. My home security camera. I drove by the corner. Time and date match. He studies the image again. He's seen 1,000 almosts in his life. This is another, a few seconds, a smudge for a number, a car the color of rain. Mrs. Grayson, he says, it's interesting. But I can't tell this is your vehicle. The plate isn't clear. Her jaw tightens. The polite voice slips its mask. That's not true. You're letting him decide how my day goes because I didn't smile at him. The room stills. A pen stops tapping. A bailiff shifts, but only an inch. We'll verify what can be verified, Caprio says, gentle as a door on oiled hinges. She doesn't nod. Something colder sits in her stare, not fear, not defense, but offense sharpened to a point. She draws breath like a sprinter at the blocks. I won't be made a lesson, she says, quieter now, more dangerous. Not by him. Not by anyone. Caprio holds her gaze. He has grandchildren. He has seen grief slam into people like weather. He has also seen pride put on a uniform and call itself principle. Ma'am, he says, the truth will do the deciding. Not me. Not the officer. She looks at the phone, then up again. Then let's bring all of it in. Around them, the courthouse sounds resume, the clerk rustles the docket, a door thumps somewhere in the building, the fluorescent lights buzz on with a tiny stutter. It's an ordinary morning trying to stay ordinary. Caprio taps the bench. We'll hear from the officer. A small smile cuts across her face, the kind that doesn't reach anything soft. Good, she says. The bailiff steps toward the side door. The hinge squeals. A uniform waits beyond it. The room breathes in as one, bracing for what the camera didn't catch. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. The bailiff's step hasn't faded when Caprio shifts his attention back to her, as if turning a lens. While we wait, tell me about yourself, Mrs. Grayson. She squares her shoulders, the posture of a person who's practiced being unshakable. Insurance. Risk models and claims. Twice divorced. My daughter's 16. I pay my taxes. I don't cut corners. I won't be treated like a petty offender because someone wrote a number on a form. The room listens. Caprio notes the tremor under the polish, fatigue that has learned to speak in declarative sentences. What happened that morning? I was driving my daughter to school. We were behind schedule. A quick inhale, crisp as paper. He was sitting on the shoulder. I eased off, I did. He waved me over and started talking to me the way men do when they've decided you need shrinking. Like I was 15. Like manners are a leash. Was he unprofessional? Caprio asks. He didn't have to raise his voice. He made himself taller in other ways. She allows a tight smile that isn't humor. You've seen it. Every woman in this room has. Murmur, then silence again. Caprio's pencil rests, unmarked. You say his record is wrong. He wrote 50. I know my speed. 30, maybe a hair above. Not what he claimed. He wanted a point on the board, and I was convenient. Anyone with you? My daughter. Caprio nods to the clerk. The side door opens. A thin girl enters, ponytail imperfect, sleeves pulled over her knuckles. She finds her mother with a glance that doesn't land, then stares at the carpet. What's your name? Caprio asks. Lena. Barely audible. You were in the passenger seat that morning? Yes. Did your mother drive fast? Lena's throat moves. No. I mean, she wasn't speeding, the words scatter and she gathers them, palms pressed to her thighs. Not like he said. The mother doesn't turn, but pride flashes across her face like a match. Caprio softens his tone. Are you certain? A beat. I think so. The judge reads the space between syllables, the way teenagers invent certainty to make storms pass, the way love wants to be useful. He chooses not to press. The girl's shoes touch at the heels, she lowers her chin. Thank you, Lena. You can sit. He waits until she slips onto the bench, eyes fixed on a spot only she can see. Caprio returns to the mother. You work with numbers, he says mildly. You know how records matter. And I know how numbers get used, she answers. How authority hides behind them. The veneer of confidence holds, but hairline cracks appear, a quick blink, a swallow that takes effort. She's fighting two trials, this one, and a quieter one about dignity, about how often she's had to perform strength. Caprio's gaze rests, patient. He's not trading in sermons, he's mapping motives. I'm hearing two claims, he says. One about speed. One about respect. They're the same, she replies. If he respected me, he wouldn't have written fiction. The door at the side clicks again. Boots. A uniformed silhouette pauses at the threshold. Heads turn in one motion. Mrs. Grayson doesn't look away from the bench. Her voice drops half an octave, steadier than before, as if she's negotiating a contract with the air itself. I'm not here for theater, Your Honor. I'm here to be believed. The officer steps forward, early 30s, clean cut, the kind of man who still irons his sleeves even after 12-hour shifts. His badge catches the courtroom light like a coin tossed into a fountain. Caprio gestures for him to approach the stand. Officer Raines, the judge begins, his voice neutral but carrying the weight of habit. Describe what happened that morning. Raines's gaze flicks briefly toward Mrs. Grayson, then anchors itself on the far wall, where the state seal watches everyone equally. I was posted outside Elmwood Elementary. Patrol car parked. It was 7:42 am, school zone active. I clocked a silver sedan doing 52 in a 25. The radar confirmed the reading. I followed procedure, signaled her to pull over. She complied but seemed upset. I introduced myself, explained the stop. She began recording immediately, accused me of targeting her. I stayed calm. She called me, quote, a bored little man with a radar gun. End quote. The judge's pencil hesitates on the pad but doesn't write. He looks at Mrs. Grayson, whose jaw has turned into geometry, sharp, controlled, unyielding. Was the radar calibrated properly that day? Caprio asks. Yes, Your Honor. We run verification tests every morning at roll call. It passed at 7:15. The judge nods slowly. Bodycam footage. Rains gestures to the technician. Available and queued. A screen descends with a hum. The courtroom lights dim just enough for faces to become pale ovals. The footage starts, time-stamped, steady. The camera's perspective catches everything, the school sign blinking, the traffic, the silver sedan easing to a stop. The officer's voice through the speaker is polite, procedural. "Good morning, ma'am. Do you know why I stopped you?" Then hers, clipped, defensive. "No, but I'm sure you'll tell me." The clip runs less than a minute, but the energy in the room shifts several degrees colder. Her tone sharpens, his stays measured. "You just want to feel important," she says on screen. "Power trip for the day?" Caprio signals to pause. The screen freezes with her mid-sentence, hand raised as if blocking light. The sound dies, leaving a silence so thick it could be mistaken for gravity. He looks at her again, but not accusingly, curiously, as though trying to read the faint script behind her anger. "Mrs. Grayson, that is your voice?" "Yes." It comes out smaller than she expects. But he was wrong about the speed. "I'm not asking about speed yet," Caprio replies softly. "I'm asking about how you remember the moment." She folds her arms, breathes through her nose. He was condescending. "You can't hear that on the video." Rains shifts slightly. "I treated her as I treat anyone, Your Honor. Respectfully." Caprio nods again, an old man's nod, the kind that gathers decades of repetition. "Maybe you both felt unheard," he says. Then, to her, "You mentioned humiliation earlier. What made you feel that way?" Her eyes flick toward her daughter, then back to the bench. "He stopped me in front of my child. Like I was some delinquent." The judge's voice remains level. "He stopped a vehicle going double the limit near a school. That is his duty. He could have warned me. Not written a citation like he'd caught a criminal." The word criminal lingers, hovers, refuses to settle. Caprio lets it float for a full breath before replying. "Sometimes," he says quietly, "what feels like punishment is only consequence." Her lips part to speak, but nothing comes. For the first time, the confidence looks rehearsed, costly, brittle. She lowers her gaze, staring at the grain of the wooden table as though it might offer her a version of events that fits. The judge turns to Rains. "You may step back, officer." Rains nods once and moves aside, posture still immaculate. The hum of the projector dies, lights return to full. The ordinary brightness feels almost intrusive now. Mrs. Grayson exhales, unsteady. Caprio leans back in his chair, folds his hands. "Mrs. Grayson," he says, "the footage doesn't prove intent or emotion, only moments. But what it does show is composure on one side and distress on the other. Would you agree?" She looks up, eyes glassy but fierce. "I was angry because I was afraid." He tilts his head. "Afraid of what?" "Of being small," she whispers. "Of being powerless in front of my daughter." The room doesn't move. Even the clerk's fingers stop their habitual tapping. Caprio nods, once. There's no judgment in his face, just understanding, quiet, weathered, almost paternal. "Then maybe," he says, "this isn't about speed at all." The words hang between them like the line where truth and pride finally meet, and begin to blur. The courtroom sits in a heavy stillness after the video fades. The air feels denser somehow, as if even sound hesitates to move. Judge Caprio lets the silence breathe for a few seconds, long enough for everyone to hear their own pulse. Then, without raising his voice, he turns toward the girl. "Miss Grayson," he says gently. "A moment ago, you told us your mother wasn't speeding. I want you to think carefully. Are you prepared to swear to that under oath?" The girl's fingers twist together, knuckles whitening. She glances toward her mother, then at the floor. I'm not sure," she whispers. "I wasn't looking at the speedometer. Mom was just upset." The words hang in the air like fine dust. Someone exhales sharply in the back row. Mrs. Grayson turns, her face pale but blazing with disbelief. "You were supposed to back me up," she hisses, the sentence meant to be private but sharp enough for the first 2 rows to hear. Caprio lifts his hand, not loud, not angry, just final. "That's enough." The girl freezes. The mother sinks an inch lower in her chair. The judge's tone stays soft, though it lands with the weight of a verdict. "Mrs. Grayson, you just asked your daughter to lie to protect your pride. This isn't about velocity anymore. It's about truth." A ripple moves through the benches, low murmurs, uneasy shifting. Caprio doesn't look away. "You wanted to prove that the officer lied," he continues. "But what we see instead is a man doing his duty, and a mother asking her child to carry her anger." Mrs. Grayson opens her mouth, searching for a defense that isn't there. The words don't come. Caprio leans forward slightly. "Do you understand what that teaches her? That truth is negotiable when we're embarrassed. That dignity is something we buy with someone else's honesty." Her breathing grows shallow, the room feels suddenly too small. She wants to speak, to explain that she's tired, that she's been dismissed too many times, that the uniform triggered something she didn't expect, but all of that would sound like excuses, and excuses are just slower lies. He doesn't press. He simply waits. And that waiting becomes unbearable. From somewhere near the back, a cough. Then silence again, complete, immaculate. Caprio's next words slice through it quietly, the way light cuts fog. "Mrs. Grayson, pride is a hard armor. But armor doesn't make you strong. It just makes you unreachable." She lowers her gaze. Her hands, perfectly manicured, tremble on the table. In the second row, her daughter looks at her not with fear, but with confusion, the kind that comes when a child sees the myth of a parent crack just enough to let truth spill through. Caprio writes a few notes, though the outcome has already shifted somewhere deeper than the paperwork. When he looks up again, his eyes have softened. "We'll take a brief recess," he says. "Perhaps we all need to remember why we're here." The gavel touches wood, light but final. The echo follows them out, mother, daughter, officer, all 3 caught in the same quiet reckoning that no sentence can fully resolve. When the court reconvenes, the air has changed. The restless buzz from earlier has thinned into a wary calm. Mrs. Grayson sits with her shoulders drawn in, eyes lowered, while her daughter leans a little closer, not in defiance this time, but in quiet worry. Officer Raines waits near the front, still as a lamppost, hat tucked beneath his arm. Judge Caprio clears his throat and gestures to him. "Officer Raines, would you approach the bench, please?" Raines steps forward. His boots make no sound on the linoleum. "Officer," Caprio begins, "I can tell you're fairly new to the force. It wasn't an easy morning, was it?" "No, Your Honor." Raines's voice is calm, but his gaze betrays thought. "It was one of those stops where you can tell the situation's bigger than the ticket." She was shouting, "Yes." "But I realized after a few seconds, it wasn't really about me." Caprio studies him. "What do you mean by that?" Raines glances toward Mrs. Grayson before answering. "People yell when they've already been silenced somewhere else. Sometimes I just happen to be standing where their anger finally lands. It's not personal." A pause, long enough for those words to settle in the woodwork. Then Caprio nods once, slow and deliberate. "That's a remarkably human observation, officer. You've said in 2 sentences what some don't learn in decades of service. The compliment isn't flattery. It's recognition." He turns to Mrs. Grayson, whose chin lifts an inch as though bracing herself for another blow. "Do you hear how he speaks about you, ma'am?" Caprio says quietly. "No resentment. No pride. Just understanding." Her eyes flick toward the officer. For the first time all morning, there's no fire there, only a hollow uncertainty, the space left after certainty dissolves. "I didn't mean to humiliate him," she says, voice nearly lost. I just felt attacked. And I couldn't let myself look weak. Not in front of my daughter. Caprio folds his hands, the gesture of a man who's handled too many stories dressed as excuses. You didn't look weak, he says softly. You looked dishonest. And that's what children remember longest. The words cut, not cruelly but cleanly. She blinks hard, jaw trembling once before she forces it still. Rains doesn't move. The girl presses her lips together, her eyes glistening. I understand, Mrs. Grayson whispers finally. The syllables sound foreign in her mouth, as if admitting them costs her breath. Caprio nods. Understanding isn't the same as changing. But it's the first doorway. Her gaze drifts toward her daughter, who meets it at last. Something fragile passes between them, recognition, apology, maybe even relief. The judge writes a brief note on his pad, but his focus stays on the woman before him. Pride can't love anyone, he says almost to himself. It can only defend itself. Then louder, Mrs. Grayson, do you wish to add anything before I deliver my decision tomorrow? She shakes her head. No, Your Honor. I think, enough has been said. Caprio gives a single approving nod. Then we'll adjourn until morning. Sometimes a night's silence teaches more than 1,000 arguments. He strikes the gavel once, softly, like punctuation at the end of a hard-earned sentence. As people begin to rise, the officer steps back, pausing just near her table. He doesn't speak, only nods once, an unspoken truce. She watches him go, realizing perhaps for the first time that decency can exist even inside authority. Her daughter touches her sleeve. Mom. Mrs. Grayson exhales, a sound half sigh, half surrender. Let's go home. They leave the courtroom together, the door closing gently behind them, leaving the echo of Rains's words. Sometimes people yell because someone else made them feel small, lingering in the quiet like a truth the whole room needed to hear. The next morning, the courtroom feels lighter, sun slipping through the high windows, catching on dust like slow-moving gold. The benches are quieter, almost reverent. Mrs. Grayson sits straighter, though her hands are clasped tight in her lap. Her daughter watches her with a new, measured calm. Judge Caprio enters without fanfare, settles his papers, and looks over the rim of his glasses. Mrs. Grayson, he begins, his voice steady but warm, the court has reviewed the evidence. You are guilty of exceeding the speed limit. The fine is $200. A murmur stirs, but he raises a hand. However, he adds, this fine isn't the lesson. She blinks, uncertain. You don't want me to pay it? Oh, you'll pay it, he says with the trace of a smile. But not here. You will send those $200 to the Children of Fallen Officers Fund, and you will do so in your own name. In my name, she repeats softly. Yes. Because when we find the courage to admit we were wrong, it's not weakness, it's strength. And the only kind that lasts. The woman lowers her head. Her voice wavers, but it's steady enough to carry. I'll do it. Caprio nods once. He adjusts his glasses, then leans forward, his tone quieter now, almost like a father speaking to a tired child. Mrs. Grayson, I don't question your anger. I know what it is to feel unseen, unheard. Life can harden us without asking permission. But truth, he pauses, truth doesn't always look like victory. Sometimes it looks like defeat that makes us better. She exhales, her shoulders trembling as if something heavy is finally leaving. Thank you, Your Honor, she says. Then, turning slightly, and I'm sorry, officer. Rains, still near the wall, gives a short nod. No harm done, ma'am. The courtroom stays quiet, the kind of silence that feels like acknowledgement rather than absence. Caprio signs the final page, then looks up with a faint smile. Mrs. Grayson, you've just taught your daughter more about integrity than any fine could buy. Don't waste it. She nods, blinking back the thin sheen in her eyes. I won't. The gavel touches wood, light as a whisper. Case closed. Mother and daughter stand. As they turn to leave, the girl reaches for her mother's hand, a small gesture, but full of forgiveness. Outside the courtroom doors, she murmurs, "Mom, you looked stronger when you told the truth." For the first time in days, Mrs. Grayson smiles, not to defend, not to prove, but to feel. "Maybe that's what real strength is," she says quietly. Inside, Caprio watches them go, the faintest curve of pride on his lips. "This," he says to no one in particular, "is why we're here. The law doesn't punish, it reminds." And as the doors close behind them, the morning light fills the empty bench, settling on the space where pride turned into something far rarer, grace.